Good afternoon. Welcome to the final session of the day today. Running just a little bit behind, but we'll be scheduled for about the next 45 minutes talking about the grassroots of soccer youth development here in the Americas. So just want to start with some introductions. This may take a little while because we've got a very exciting panel here today. To start, right to my left, we've got Gerard Houllier. Since July 2012, Gerard has served as Global Head of Football for Red Bull and responsible for Red Bull Salzburg, RB Leipzig, New York Red Bulls, as well as Red Bull Academy in Brazil. As the Technical Director for French Football Federation, Gerard was famously part of setting up the Golden Generation that won the 1998 World Cup and 2000 UEFA Euros. His coaching career has spanned 5 decades, including Lens, Paris Saint-Germain, Liverpool, Lyon, and Aston Villa. To his left, we have Kevin Payne. I've known Kevin for quite some time. Kevin is the CEO of U.S. Club Soccer. He's one of the most experienced and influential figures in American soccer, with more than 25 years of high-profile executive leadership, with positions in U.S. Soccer and Major League Soccer, including president of DC United, where he won 4 MLS Cups, founding member of the MLS Board of Governors, board member of the U.S. Soccer Federation. He currently serves as the vice chairman of the U.S. Soccer Foundation and remains on the U.S. Soccer's technical working group. He was appointed CEO of U.S. Club Soccer in 2015, which is a national organization committed to the development and support of youth soccer and youth clubs in the U.S., with 500,000 members and 75,000 elite coaches. Next, we have Gustavo Grossi. Gustavo is the sporting director for River Plate in Argentina. A lot of attention on their club right now. Gustavo brings more than 20 years of experience to high-level football in management roles across a variety of different countries in the Americas, including Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Italy, Mexico, and Paraguay. And finally, we have Jason Roberts down here on the far left. Jason is the CONCACAF Development Director. Jason played more than 200 matches in the English Premier League with teams such as West Bromwich Albion, Portsmouth, Wigan Athletic, Blackburn, and Reading. He retired in 2014 and was named to his current role in November 2017. He now manages development programs, coaching education, and professional development initiatives. He's currently a member of the FIFA Player Status Committee and graduate of the UEFA MIP Executive Course. Also, just a little bit of information about the Jason Roberts Foundation was established in 2007 and provides young people opportunities to learn and build confidence through sport in both the UK and in the Caribbean. So now that I've gotten through the introductions and we still have some time left to chat, I'm going to start with Gerard here to my left. As we were chatting just before we began the conversation, Gerard was talking a lot about the phases of development of youth soccer. And really this session is discussing the grassroots development of the game. The ages 19 and younger, but specifically 12 and younger. So Gerard, I'd like to start with you. Could you talk a little bit about the phases of development and some of the systems that you put in place in France?
Well, thank you, Glenn. Good afternoon, everybody. When a player at the age of 19 or 20 gets into the first team, to the professional side, you cannot imagine that he started football just a year before. So now it's become so sophisticated that between the age of 8, maybe 7, 8, 9, and the age of 19, there's a lot of football years. There's 3 phases. One, I'll start with between 15 and 19. That's what we call the formats of the training, the development of the player itself. Now, what we notice is that when you have technical shortcomings at the age of 15 or 16, it's very difficult to catch up. So we put up in place another scheme, which is between 12 and 15, and that's what we call the years of pre-formation or pre-academy. Once we've done that, our football practically really rocket to another level. I mean, which in fact players like Thierry Henry, Anelka, Gallas, that's a generation. Then we had all the players. Mbappe went through that scheme. They did that scheme, and then they went to the formation, to the 15 to 19, and then professional. So what we're talking about today is grassroots, which is between 7, 8, and 12. This is where we change a lot because it used to be untrained coaches. Now we've asked, once you have one team, one coach. So we ask practically every club to have a trained coach for youth, really. And this is where the future lies, I think, because any neurosurgeon will tell you that the best year is the young years to wait and to learn. It doesn't mean to do some professional training. It means that they have one training or two training or three trainings is different, but training mainly based on the skill. So that's the first, this is the 3 stages, the 3 phases. We're talking about the grassroots, but we know the grassroots will condition the quality of the second and third phase.
Kevin, from your perspective here in the United States, just being a leader in the industry and seeing the game grow so much over the past few decades, what would you say your assessment is of youth soccer in the U.S. and specifically what your organization is doing to help change that?
Well, I think our approach to youth soccer is very different than almost any other country in the world. You know, the greatest explosion of youth soccer in this country occurred at a time when there was no national professional league. In the middle and late 80s and into the early 90s, when soccer really exploded on the scene. And so youth soccer became an end in itself. And we still battle some of the aspects of that. I think that you know, the absolute clear-eyed analysis of where we are is simply that we have to get better at all of these areas. So whether it's what we call level 1, which is under 12, or level 2, 12 to 19, or level 3, 19 to 23, we're a little bit deficient in all those areas. And it's going to take time. We have to have a clear-eyed recognition of our shortcomings so that we can try to address them.
And Gustavo, there's 40 million people in the country of Argentina. There's 350 million here in the United States. How has Argentina been able to produce so many world-class players at such a young age, bring them up through the academy system? Talk a little bit about your role at River Plate and what you've seen specifically in South America over the years in terms of youth development.
Bueno, un poco lo único que principalmente puedo destacar es que la diferencia del desarrollo es tan grande casi como la diferencia del idioma, ¿no? O sea, son polos opuestos. Nuestra prioridad absoluta es el futbolista. Ponemos el futbolista y el reclutamiento del talento de ese futbolista en nuestro continente por encima de la metodología, por encima de la infraestructura, por encima de un montón de cosas que el mundo funciona quizás a veces un poco al revés, ¿no? Primero la infraestructura, como aquí en Estados Unidos, luego la organización, un buen método, y nosotros priorizamos otras cosas que es a partir del gran talento que nosotros podemos encontrar dentro de posibilidades económicas mucho menores, empezar a darle la opción de la evolución. También la diferencia que van a notar entre el continente sudamericano y el resto de otros continentes donde el fútbol de élite se destaca es que nuestros futbolistas o nuestros talentos, el 90% ha nacido por debajo de la línea de la pobreza. Las condiciones del hambre de ese futbolista por conseguir la gloria deportiva y económica es diferente, la agresividad es diferente, o sea, todo el contexto social es absolutamente diferente al que se va a encontrar en Europa, el que se va a encontrar en los Estados Unidos o en diferentes lugares donde las inversiones son superiores. Eso no significa que tengamos un método profesional de cómo entrenarlos, de cómo darle evolución, de cómo darle educación, pero sí marcar claramente que el futbolista que nace en Sudamérica tiene un montón de características particulares que no son las mismas de futbolistas ya sea de Europa o de aquí de Estados Unidos. Y después, desde la parte genética, también remarcar que nosotros somos una cruza entre el europeo que ha llegado a conquistar en su momento las Américas con el africano que ha llegado a partir de ese europeo, con un montón de efectos de colonizaciones y de cruzas que nos generan un carácter que a este deporte le dan un plus, que a este deporte le dan una diferenciación, que bueno, no la hemos podido equilibrar con la profesionalización que tienen en otros puntos del mundo, y por eso siempre nuestros grandes talentos, por una cuestión económica, Brasil, Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay como ejemplo, son de exportación continua. Si nosotros en nuestros países tendríamos a nuestros talentos, a nuestros futbolistas, creo yo que no habría liga del mundo que pueda competir con nuestro nivel deportivo, pero eso no va a ser viable ni hoy ni mañana. Somos un sector de absoluta exportación de talento y de eso vivimos y por ahí transitamos.
And Jason, shifting over to you, we really have a global perspective here on the panel today, which is exciting. But could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing throughout the CONCACAF region? I know you're specifically instituting coaching education and other grassroots programs across those 41 countries, which is a huge geographic region. So how do you go about doing that, and what are some of the things that you're tasked with in your role?
Thank you very much, Glenn, and good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, when you was talking through the introduction to Gerard, you didn't mention the fact that I had played against his side numerous times with Liverpool and Aston Villa, and I never ever won. So I'm going to challenge him to a game after we finish this talk today. That aside, in regards to my position as Director of Development for CONCACAF, the one golden thread between what everybody's been talking about today is the level of coaches and coach education. And that's something at CONCACAF which is a distinct, important target for us. We started our coach education directives in 2013, building a coach licensing system which will allow us to work with all of our 41 different member associations. And as you can imagine, the issues and the challenges are very diverse, from St. Lucia to St. Kitts to the USA to Mexico and Canada. So we've identified a program that allows us to work with our member associations, to work with their best coach instructors to deliver our D licenses and our C license coaching. But also we're developing our B license as well, and it's important that we do all of these things at the same time, because whilst we are investing in new competitions, whilst we have the Nations League in place, which means that we have more games. I actually played for Grenada for 20 years and I have 12 caps, because we would come up for the World Cup qualifiers, 2 games against the USA, we'd lose, we'd go away 4 years later, 2 more games against Costa Rica and lose again. So what we need to develop from a grassroots standpoint right the way through is coaches who are given the opportunity to make the best of their situation, and that's something that we've focused on at CONCACAF, as well as ensuring that the competitions that are key to development. So our perspective is extremely broad and trying to ensure that there are opportunities not just for players at the grassroots level through our Next Play program, which has seen us partner with 5 different member associations to ensure that there's after schools football as well as increased competition. And when we speak about grassroots, I think also we need to focus, you'll have these technical experts who may give you different ideas. I think it's clear that there's an elite pathway and a participation pathway. And I think certainly in CONCACAF, we need to ensure that we're giving access to as many people as possible, boys and girls, to ensure that they foster the love for the game, because football can be a tool for social development. And we want to ensure that the elite pathway is there, but also the participation is grown right across the Confederation.
And so I'll just open this question up to the group. How do we go about identifying the best players at those youngest ages? Because one of the things that we've talked about and we know is that as the players get older, it becomes much more challenging for them to be able to play at that elite level, to be able to represent their country, for them to be able to play professionally. How do we as an industry go about identifying those talented players at that young of an age?
I'll just make one comment on this, and then I'm interested to hear what Gustavo and Gerard in particular have to say. But there's a lot of research on this in different sports, and there was recently an exhaustive study done in Germany, and what they found was that there was a 0% correlation between early athletic achievement and eventual athletic success. meaning that at the age of 11 or 12, you can't predict who's going to emerge as a mature athlete. So what that means is what you have to try to do is ensure that every player in those youngest ages is getting the right foundation, because you don't know which one of them is the one that's going to emerge and have an opportunity to play professionally or, you know, for their national team.
Kevin is right. You've got to be very careful. I mean, first of all, you remember the 3 steps. Grassroots, you welcome everybody. Everybody must come. You just have to organize the training. You can have 100 kids on a pitch and organize, you know, workshops or things like that, or different games. Because you don't play 11 aside when they are that age. You play 5 aside, 7 aside, maybe when they get a bit older, 9 aside, with, of course, more restricted areas, so they can touch the ball more often. So before the age of 11, 12, you can't say anything. If you say something, you're very lucky. You've got to be careful. Griezmann, who is now playing for Atletico Madrid and played for the national team of France, was turned down by a professional club in France because he was not, you know, strong enough. So you've got to be very, very careful. I think the age where you can really spot the talent is around 12, 13. Then you can say, oh, it's got a chance. But the talent needs to be confirmed sometime. There's various elements that come into part. But between 12, 13, or you can say, well, maybe he's got something.
Glenn, I have something I'd like to say on this, on my journey into playing in the Premier League, is that as a youngster, I was of a very high standard at Chelsea, at Aston Villa, and I was very highly thought of. But at 15 years old, I didn't progress in the way that other young players progressed, and I found myself outside of the game. I was playing amateur football. I found myself a job. What was key was that I was still involved in the participation of football, so I was still playing. And many other people of the same level who feel at that stage that they were going to go on to become footballers, when they didn't get the pathway they expected, they fell outside of the game. I was lucky to be in an environment in the UK where I was able to stay in the game in participation. So at 19 years old, where I started to develop as a physical specimen, that's when I started to get the opportunities. And then I showed the ability that was always there. So I think we need to be, to your point earlier, we need to be careful about identifying talent too young. Because in many cases, those are the young players that don't progress in the way that we expected. At 19 years old, as an amateur player, no one would have expected I would have played in the Premier League. But continued access to the sport gave me that opportunity.
That's a mental thing, though. That's also the mental thing.
Agreed.
The mental is the roof. I mean, if you take a player, you've got of course, the physical side, the technical, the tactical, but the roof is the mental. If the roof leaks, it's not good for the house. So he had a strong mental. Okay. When he said he never scored against us, I'm pleased because I had a plan against him.
Gustavo, can you talk a little bit about, in River Plate, that age group, the pre-academy age group that we're talking about, 12, 13 and above, what are some of the traits that you're looking for in players, and how do you go about developing them so they eventually get to the first team?
Acerca de la pregunta que marcabas antes, de cómo la industria se da cuenta cuando hay un gran talento, la mala noticia es que no se van a dar cuenta. Porque aquellos que tienen vocación y tienen un don son aquellos que se dan cuenta y son los que están en cada una de las canchas, en algunas esquinas de determinados continentes y tienen el ojo entrenado para hacerlo. O sea, seguramente lo van a encontrar cuando la exposición de la televisión o de los medios pongan ese talento a la vista. Previamente van a estar en un estado de confusión de quién es mejor, quién es peor o para qué nivel está. En el continente donde yo trabajo, la reclutación del talento es mucho más abajo en las edades, porque nosotros tenemos que generar un futbolista de venta a los 18 años. El continente sudamericano empieza a reclutar a los 8 o 9 años y a los 18 tiene que tener un producto terminado. Otros continentes pueden tenerlo a los 21, a los 22 o a los 20, por lo cual nosotros hacemos recibir un abogado, un contador, un médico 3 años antes que cualquier lugar del mundo. Es una desventaja, pero a su vez es lo que necesita el mundo, que son prodigios. El que se instala en este tipo de industria de alto rendimiento es el prodigio, no es el talento. El prodigio es aquel que no tiene techo de aprendizaje, que no tiene freno en la evolución, es Messi. Todos los demás primero tienen una habilidad, esa habilidad se convierte en un talento porque la aplican a un juego, pero tienen un techo de aprendizaje y terminan a los 15, a los 18, a los 20, a los 25. Pero el que no tiene techo de aprendizaje, ese es el que se instala como un prodigio, que es el que toda la industria quiere, que son los grandes futbolistas que ustedes ven por la televisión. Ellos todos los días están aprendiendo y están creciendo de manera continua, en lo físico, en lo táctico, en lo mental, en lo intelectual. O sea, esa es la diferencia que yo puedo contarles mínimamente en algo que no es transferible, que es para la gente quizás más involucrada en el fútbol desde lo interno, pero sí darle ese detalle, que aquellos que piensan que pueden ver, tienen algo invisible para encontrar. Nosotros, por ejemplo, a mí me toca ver 76.000 futbolistas al año y reclutar para el proyecto de River 46 sobre esos 76.000, entre los 10 y 14 años. Entonces mi ojo está entrenado en todo el continente sudamericano de una manera que puedo comparar un niño de Colombia con uno de Chile, con uno de Argentina, nacido el mismo año y elegir. Entonces esa posibilidad es para los que nos dedicamos en el trabajo diario del fútbol. Esa es una situación que les puedo dar acerca de eso que hablan de qué es lo que ven y por qué encontraron a quien encontraron.
Glenn, I just want to mention one of the challenges we have in the United States is our culture of coaching that has developed over the years. So in a country like Argentina or France or Spain, countries that are really very good at developing players, being a coach who specializes in developing players is a profession. That is a very worthy role for somebody who aspires to be a coach. In our country, for many, many years, we trained every coach the same. Our licensing system was, we trained every coach as though they were going to be the U.S. national team coach. It was the same kind of curriculum. That's beginning to change now, but too often in our country, the level of coaching at the youngest age is just not good enough. I went, a number of years ago when I was still at DC United, we took a team to a futures tournament at Ajax. And actually got to watch Eden Hazard and some of the other great Belgian players on a very young Anderlecht team. And I was introduced to the under-9 program director for Ajax, and it was Dennis Bergkamp. In the United States, it's more often than not a parent who's looking at his cell phone trying to figure out what drills to do during training. So this is one of the areas where the United States is well behind countries like Argentina or like France or the other big player development powers. We don't value that task sufficiently. I'm hoping that will change. That's certainly what my organization is trying to change that with our La Liga program. But it is a cultural change that will take time.
Why coaches are linked to the quality of your players, your football players? If you want, whether it's a grassroots, whether it's in the pre-academy or the academy, if the ultimate aim is to have better players. You want to have at the top, at the elite, better players. If you want better players, you want to have better trained players. If you want better trained players, you need to have better training. If you want better training, you need to have better trainers. And if you want better trainers, you need to have a coach education program which is set up by the FA or by the Confederation to train coaches to take the appropriate team at the right level.
So I'm fortunate where in my full-time job, I work in this industry, but my other hat I wear as a youth soccer coach. So I'm actually up here, I should be taking notes because I'm getting a lot of good information. Kevin, to go back on your point on developing coaches here in the United States, you touched a little bit about the relationship with La Liga. You all launched Players First. Can you talk about those two items? I think that would be helpful for the group to understand a little bit about what's taking place here through U.S.
Sure.
Soccer.
Well, and U.S. Soccer has done a great deal in the last couple of years in particular to modernize their licensing system. So they're basically following the model of France and of Spain and what has been done in Europe. And they're trying to create different pathways for different roles. And then they're making the coursework much more rigorous and challenging. So if you want to have an A license, it's a real commitment of time. What we're trying to do is to supplement the license process with continuing education. So the particular individual that runs courses for La Liga with us is a fellow named Gary Filiando. For 9 years, Gary was the methodology director at Atletico Bilbao, which is one of the most remarkable player development programs in the world. They can only play Basque players. There's only 2 million Basque, and they're sharing them with Real Sociedad. And in the history of La Liga, there have only been 3 clubs which have never been relegated. 2 of them you can guess pretty easily, and the third is Atletico Bilbao. So they have to develop players. They have to learn how to do this. So what Gary is trying to teach people across the United States is how to develop a methodology that works for them, how to translate your understanding of curriculum into, digestible way of teaching for the players, which goes back to Gerard's point, and I quote Gerard all the time when I'm speaking around the country. If you want better players, you need better coaches, and if you want better coaches, you need a better system of training coaches. It doesn't happen by accident.
And this is what's fantastic about viewing this discussion and through the lens of director development for a confederation, because each of our member associations are at different levels of their development. So to listen to US soccer and the way that they're trying to develop their coaches and their pathways is extremely elite versus some of our FAs and our member associations where coaching isn't a pathway, it's not a profession. And that's what's extremely important when we talk about our coach licensing system and what we're trying to put in place. That a young boy or girl can look at football and decide, I want to be a coach, I want to be a manager, and there's an appropriate pathway that is financially achievable and that can be had there on their island or in their country. Because whilst it's very important to ensure that we look at the elite side of things, you still want to believe that those fantastic stories can be achievable. And to the point we've been speaking about, in my opinion, that comes from the strength of the coaching and the coach education. And as a confederation, our role is to ensure that we improve across the board, so we have more competition for the likes of the USA, etc., so we can push them on in regards to development. And that will come from us setting a platform that allows more coach education right the way throughout our region.
Gustavo, what are some of the processes you put in place for training the staff at River Plate, the youth coaches, all the way up to the first team?
Nosotros tenemos principalmente una idea del juego y a partir de esa idea del juego, de cómo jugarlo, tenemos un reclutamiento de talento para esa idea del juego. Por eso le marcaba que la prioridad es el futbolista. Encontrar ese talento, luego ponerle la infraestructura y hacerlo sentir cómodo dentro de un método. Pero nuestro método se adapta a los talentos que tenemos, nuestro juego se adapta a un fútbol ofensivo, de mucha dinámica y de mucho pase en busca del arco rival continuo, ya sea los laterales, como los volantes, como los atacantes. Nuestro primer objetivo es convertir un gol, porque esa es nuestra idea de juego. Entonces, a diferencia de otras regiones, a partir de los talentos que reclutamos, llevamos adelante nuestra idea de juego y seguimos buscando talento que mejoren esa idea de juego. El entrenador es importante, pero no el más importante. cuanta más preparación tengan, más herramienta le da a nuestros futbolistas, pero lamentablemente en nuestro continente las posibilidades de capacitación son muy bajas y si hay que estudiar en Europa la viabilidad económica es prácticamente nula. Entonces las posibilidades de evolución de nuestros entrenadores, las herramientas que tienen no son buenas y desde ahí es lo que te comento que nunca hacemos sentir incómodo a nuestro mejor talento. El equipo y la idea del juego tiene que potenciar a futbolistas que hagan ganar el partido, que luego se conviertan en una economía futura para ser transferidos. Entonces, por ese lado transita lo nuestro, encontrar un jugador aplicado a la idea del juego, nuestra idea que sea ganadora y consiga logros. Entonces el objetivo es deportivo y generar determinados puestos del campo que el mundo y la industria del fútbol necesita para que sean transferidos, para que esa economía permita que nosotros sigamos funcionando como fábrica de futbolistas en nuestro continente, productor, hoy la Argentina, el máximo productor de futbolistas del mundo, en segundo lugar Brasil muy cerca, pero con 250 millones de habitantes, ¿no? Yo soy entrenador por la CBF, soy el único argentino que estudió de entrenador en el Brasil, pero eso es a partir también que la idea de juego del club donde estoy trabajando tiene una idea de juego con algunas similitudes combinadas entre el fútbol del Río de la Plata y el fútbol del Brasil. Entonces elegí transitar, estudiar en otro país. Pero principalmente las diferencias que yo puedo contar en esto de que mis colegas hablan es que nosotros, como le dije al principio, hablamos otro idioma, vivimos otra realidad, tenemos otras circunstancias con respecto a este continente que no sé si serán aplicables. Lo que yo sí creo que lo más aplicable es la cultura. Hay que ir de la mano por lo que la cultura marca y desde ahí empezar a armar la estrategia de la idea del juego. Copiar metodologías, nosotros no lo hacemos. Brasil cuando perdió con Alemania por 7 goles lo hizo y después de 4 años que no le dio resultado, puso un entrenador como Tite que volvió a la esencia del fútbol brasilero. Entonces, sigo considerando que lo importante es jugar según lo que la sociedad del lugar donde estamos exige el estilo de juego.
So I'd like to pose a question to each one of you and would love to hear your thoughts. What does the future hold for grassroots programming in this game so that as leaders of the industry, as caretakers of the game, we continue to produce the best players? And specifically, what can the Americas take from those lessons?
Glenn, the good thing is that the minds are changing, the opinions are changing. 20 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, when I started, we used to put the best coaches with the under 17, under 19, those next to the professional side. Those who had no qualification, those who didn't think they were good, we would put them with the grassroots. That was a mistake. Now they realize, because everybody gets to know more about how we learn, how we improve, how we develop skills, how we link with the other players in the field. So now we know what is a key age for certain things, because that's practically scientific. So now clubs now tend to have good coaches, at least at the second level, second between 12 and 15. For the rest, I don't say it's parents like in America, but it's not usually the best. But it's improving. And what has France done? They say one team, one coach. So in fact, if you're in charge of a group, you've got to be a coach. It doesn't mean you have the top level, as you said, but it means you have a grassroots or a youth coaching license. And that's very important. Because some coaches are very good at that, It's a difference between making the fruit ripe and pressing the fruit, squeezing the fruit. That's different. So that's why at the moment in Europe, we tend to think that the best coaches should also be at the early age. So the future is good.
Good.
Maybe because they think they're going to maybe like the Argentina, they say, well, you know, we need to spot the talent very quickly because at the age of 18 we sell them. I wouldn't say that, but at the moment in France we saw 3 or 4 players under the age of 16, but in France, you know, you can move as you want. Or, sorry, at the age of 16, they move, they go. And they were sold quite a huge amount of money. So that means they say, oh, okay, we better have a look at the flowers very quickly, you know.
In the U.S., I think that the most important thing is for us to be flexible. We're a continent. So a youth soccer player who grows up in New Jersey has experienced as different a culture in many ways from one who grew up in Texas as a French player might from a Spanish player. So we have unique challenges here that we have to overcome. I think that there is a great deal that we can learn from the French, from the Spanish, from Argentina and Brazil, and we should make a concerted effort to learn everything we can. Ultimately, we need to develop an American way of doing this. It hopefully will take the best of those different approaches and make it American. One thing that for me is very encouraging.
This is very important what you said. The American way.
Right.
You don't have to copy, you have to adjust and to adapt.
Right. So we learn from others, but we create our own methodology. I do think that, and the French example, and Gerard really is the one who ran the whole program and conceived of it in the 90s. Really, in one generation, they won a World Cup. So it can, if you do things right, the results can happen in a reasonable period of time. We have a lot further to go. You know, France had produced Michel Platini before they changed their system. We haven't produced Michel Platini yet, so we have a little further to go than France did. But the results can come, and they can come in a reasonable fashion, a reasonable period of time if you do things right.
Como les dije al principio, en nuestro continente el 95% de los futbolistas son niños que están por debajo de la línea de la pobreza y el 5% están en condiciones de vida de clase media. El fútbol, según lo entiendo yo, el fútbol joven, depende mucho de la evolución intelectual, de la inteligencia, de la interpretación del juego. Y lamentablemente las inversiones, esos niños van todos a escuelas del Estado mayoritariamente, en educación, en alimentación, en la parte de salud, son las que se pueden hacer. Entonces, ustedes van a encontrar en Colombia un país de un desarrollo en los últimos años muy importante, porque su república, porque su modelo de país ha decidido invertir fuertemente en la educación y ellos han evolucionado en sus grados medios, menores o secundarios. Los demás países no hemos evolucionado, entonces esa inteligencia que necesita el niño para poder interpretar, para evolucionar, sabiendo que el 25% de la alimentación va al cerebro y que nuestros niños donde reclutamos para jugar al fútbol no tienen la alimentación adecuada, termina siendo que la formación de los futbolistas sudamericanos culminan en Europa. Nosotros transferimos futbolistas que llegan de una manera, de una intelectualidad muy ajustada, de una interpretación del juego desde lo táctico, desde lo cognitivo muy baja, porque no tenemos la inversión suficiente, principalmente de los estados, porque un club no se puede hacer cargo de la educación de todos los futbolistas de un país. Entonces, ese problema social se transfiere al fútbol, entonces nuestros futbolistas de 17, 18, 19 años terminan a los 24, 25 siendo estrellas en Europa porque Europa termina de formarlos, desde lo cultural, desde lo social, desde un montón de hábitos. Por supuesto que yo trabajo en River y soy un privilegiado como los 80 niños que viven en el club. Nosotros tenemos 500 jugadores y 80 tienen todo, pero solo 80. Hay 420 futbolistas que viven la realidad social y la realidad social no los ayuda a poder evolucionar en el pensamiento, en la interpretación, en la inteligencia. Creo que el modelo del futbolista del futuro es, de nuestro lado, por supuesto, el que resuelva situaciones diferentes, el que trae la genética que nuestro continente tiene, pero creo que el futbolista del futuro va a ser el más inteligente, el futbolista que mayor interpretación tenga de cómo se juega desde lo individual y cómo se mete lo individual adentro de lo colectivo.
Very interesting, because as we grassroots in the way that we're discussing it today, we've all spoke about coaching and methodology and philosophies, but as a confederation, one thing that we need to focus on is the mechanism for change. And one thing we've been putting in place with our U15 tournament, which in both boys and girls, we're the only confederation that has that in place, with a majority of our member associations participating, which ensures that access to the sport in many of the FAs that they may not have it at that particular age, 14 years old and building on into our World Cup qualifiers. How do we ensure that the good coaches, to the point earlier, are working with the best players? And that's about that mechanism. So our club licensing and our professional football development strategy, headed up by Jonathan Martinez and Christian Tonelli, is focused on minimum requirements. How do we ensure that at the U15 tournaments that you have to have a C license or higher? Ensuring that club licensing across our confederation, we've now moved into second place behind UEFA for football associations who are putting in place club licensing as a strategy. So that's really testament to the strategy we've been putting in place to ensure that our member associations understand that without the development of coaches, without the minimum requirements to ensure that those coaches are valued and we can create a profession out of what they do, we will not see that development. So we believe that with the increased competition, with the minimum requirements, while we're building our coach licensing system and working with our member associations to ensure that we have equivalency going forward, that the future in our confederation is extremely positive. Alongside our participation projects, where we're trying to ensure that more people are having access to the sport, and not just the elite players, ensuring that players who may go on to become the next supporters, the next administrators, the next coaches, the next referees, are getting continued access to the sport, because the pathways for the elite should also be replicated in participation, because without the supporters, the referees and administrators, our game will not be able to survive in the way we would like it to progress.
So we've covered a lot of topics across grassroots playing of the game, and from the phases of development to identification to coaching curriculum to methodology to where we go next. So any parting thoughts before we take some questions from the group?
No, we also need to know that grassroots means fun, enjoyment. If you want the kids, you need to organize the training so they can find. I mean, the game, the aim is not to win, is to play. The winning side will come later on, but until the age of 11, 12, the quality of your training, the diversity and what you do in the training is very important. This is why I think we need really expertise and coaches which are trained for that.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's very, very important. And every development expert that I've ever talked to, and it doesn't matter what country it is, they always stress the fact that it has to be fun for the players. These are children. And while there's a goal for some of them in mind, it needs to be a journey that they enjoy. As Jason says, not every kid, in fact, maybe 1 in 1,000 is going to have a chance at a professional career. But they all can contribute to the game in some fashion, whether as supporters or administrators, whatever it might be. So I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind. And again, our organization is very focused, as Jason is, on trying to raise the level of the experience for the broadest possible cross-section of players. And out of that will come the best players.
Comparto con lo que vienen diciendo acerca de la importancia del juego, ¿no? No olvidarnos que esto es un juego, en el cual el 1% tiene la posibilidad de llegar a ser un profesional de alta línea, de alta gama, pero que el otro porcentual puede ubicarse en diferentes niveles del fútbol y ser un profesional también. Uno busca primero la formación, que lleguen a completar en su edad de 18, 19 años, según el país, o 20 años, con la mejor formación desde lo técnico, desde lo táctico, desde todos los aspectos, pero también busca construir carácter. Y la construcción del carácter idealmente tiene que ser la de un carácter ganador, ¿no? O sea, aquí nadie va a dramatizar una derrota ni va a castigar a un niño por perder, pero al menos a mí me parece que no da lo mismo. O sea, siempre sin exageraciones, pero no es lo mismo ganar que perder en este juego, como en cualquier juego, y sin dramatizarlo. Entonces, la construcción del carácter, al menos lo que a mí me toca, me parece determinante, que no sea, estamos jugando un rato a esto y bueno, y jugamos un partido clásico y lo perdimos, pero salimos con el teléfono y nos vamos todos a un cumpleaños a ver qué pasa. Hoy aquí estamos en una industria que habla de alto rendimiento. Vamos a dividir lo social de lo recreativo del alto rendimiento. Lo social, en el cual yo participo en proyectos, tiene que ver con la contención, con este juego como una manera de sacar a niños de determinados lugares de riesgo. Lo recreativo tiene que ver con eso, con jugar sin pretender ser profesional, pero si hablamos de alto rendimiento, de industria, hablamos que la construcción de los caracteres son determinantes. Y por último decir que sé que aquí hay mucha gente que se dedica al negocio del fútbol y que el negocio del fútbol nace del futbolista. Entonces sería muy bueno que puedan interactuar con los futbolistas, porque para vender tecnología, para vender un GPS, para vender un video, si el futbolista no quiere, no hay venta. Si ustedes pueden hablar con todos los gerentes de compras del fútbol del mundo, pero el que decide es el jugador, en el nivel que sea, no importa si es la Liga de España, la de Argentina, la de Venezuela, la de Brasil, pero todo lo que ustedes quieren vender en la industria, si viene un futbolista y dice a Miami no venimos a jugar, no vienen a jugar. Entonces no hay que perder de óptica que lo más importante de este juego es el talento y es el jugador de fútbol.
I'm going to be very brief because I've seen a lot of hands shooting up as soon as we said we were going to have questions, and I know we're possibly one of the last ones up. But I just want to just close this particular piece because I think it's all been said extremely well before me, with a bit of a caution, in that my young son playing football because maybe his dad played at a certain level, or because maybe his physique, etc. When we were in Europe before I moved here to Miami, clubs were looking to recruit my son at 6 years old. And I think we need to be very mindful of what we're trying to do with our game. Of course, there is a rush to find the best players, and there is a rush to extract that value and give opportunity and develop. But there's a holistic thought process that I think we need to go through as an industry. If a 6-year-old, if a 7-year-old, if it's appropriate for us to be implementing that level of competition and pressure into the situation. And I think that's something that we should be mindful of and guard against.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a note for everybody, we're pretty much out of time, but these folks are kind enough that afterwards they will be sticking around for a couple questions in the mix zone. So if you have any follow-up questions, we have time for probably 1 or 2 questions. So gentlemen in the back. Do we have a microphone? Thank you. Oh, you've got one?
I got one already.
Yes, please. Yes.
So I
Sorry.
have a quick question. So you touch base on the importance of the mental and the character strength of the players, sometimes even beyond the technical and tactical skills as the player progresses, right? I wonder what is the role of the parents in this development. We talk about the role of the school or perhaps the club, but what is the role of the parent in the grassroots development program for the kids?
Well,
You'd be surprised, but you mean the parents who are teaching the kids?
The parents teaching the kids?
Is that right? Can you get a microphone?
So when a kid is in the program, so we talk about the coach and the club and the trainers. But what is the role of the parents in that development for those kids?
Parents of the children,
The
not
parents
the
of
coaches.
the children,
The
of
parents.
the kid that is in a program.
I'll comment on that if you don't mind, Jorge. At the broadest level, the parents in the U.S., and it's probably different in Argentina or France, but the parents in the U.S. need to keep a sense of perspective about what their role is. Their role should be to support their children and make sure that they're enjoying their experience. You know, we have almost 75% of players who begin playing soccer in this country quit by the time they're 13 years old. And the vast majority of them quit because it's no longer any fun. And the reason it's no longer any fun is because the adults that are involved in the equation, their parents and then their coach, puts too much pressure on them. And it's not fun anymore. Kids play sports because it's fun. They leave sports when it's not fun. It's a little different in places like Argentina where it's a way out economically. But I'll let Gustavo or Gerard.
Once a kid is coached by a proper coach, somebody, the parents don't have the same influence. The kids will listen to the coach. If the coach obviously is doing the appropriate thing, you know, the right thing for him, this is why it's important to have the right coach, particularly for the right age, because the kids will listen more and the coach will have more influence on him than the parents. And that's where the coach has an important role to play in terms of not telling them to be strong and things like that, you know, but just helping them to surpass difficulty, you know, to react positively to, you know, when he can't do something, he will try again, he will try again, and at some stage he'll manage. So I think the coach will be more the father figure once, you know, he does the right thing.
Gustavo?
Yo creo que los padres se tienen que ocupar de alimentarlos y educarlos, ¿no? De nada más. No conozco ningún padre que vaya a una escuela mientras su hijo está dentro de un aula con una maestra de matemática y que le ande diciendo si él sabe mejor matemática que su maestra. Así que los padres considero que tienen que alimentarlos, educarlos y contenerlos en sus casas. Nosotros trabajamos sin la posibilidad de que los padres entren a los entrenamientos. Tenemos una relación solo de información puntual. Entonces lo que el niño hace con su entrenador y dentro de un proyecto de fútbol, el padre que no confía en ese proyecto lo tiene que cambiar de proyecto, pero no interactuar. En principio, te doy ese ejemplo. No creo que ningún padre vaya a ninguna escuela a explicarle a su hijo que él sabe mejor que su profesora de lengua, de matemática o de filosofía. Lo mismo pienso para el fútbol. Así que el padre que tome el camino de pensar que puede ayudar a su hijo pensando que sabe más que su entrenador, toma el camino de terminar con la carrera de su hijo.
I'll make a brief comment from my position as an ex-player. Is whilst technically it's absolutely correct, and you know the point about going in and giving a maths lesson while the kid is in school is absolutely correct. But the reality of it is, if you feel as a parent or as a child, you feel that this is your avenue to make it out of a difficult economic situation, which we see for a majority of players who are coming through, it's very difficult to ask the parents to make the right decision in regards to economically not trying to make the best out of that, maybe too young, or maybe not trying to get involved in the technical aspect. The reality of it is, with so much money on the line so early, the pressure and the situations become very blurred. I agree technically it's absolutely correct, but in reality it's very difficult to ask someone to come from a challenging background to allow the youngster to enjoy the sport when so much money is on the table so young.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we've got time for just one more question. We've got a question up here in the front. Yes, I think we've got a mic coming. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
So I'm from Brazil. The grassroots in Brazil, it's always involved in futsal. you know, in the younger age. It's fun. It's more touches. Develop the technical piece. I know Argentina won the last World Cup. I don't know how you guys see the futsal game being a grassroots more in the U.S.
Really? Futsal, excellent.
Good answer.
That was going to be my answer.
It's becoming more and more important in the U.S. Using Brazil and Argentina as the examples of why.
Nosotros siempre estamos un poco al revés de todo, fuimos los campeones del mundo porque tuvimos un gran entrenador, un grupo de 25 atletas extraordinarios. Nuestro desarrollo del futsal no es popular para nada. Nuestra actividad de reclutamiento se llama baby fútbol, que es otra característica porque tiene otras reglamentaciones, pero es lo que pasa en nuestro continente. Cuando se une un gran entrenador con 10 o 15 grandes talentos, hemos salido campeones del mundo. Me encantaría decir que tenemos un gran proyecto vinculado al desarrollo del futsal, pero nuestro país no lo tiene como un deporte principal previo a jugar a la cancha de 11. Sí, Brasil, por eso el fútbol de Brasil y el de Argentina tienen algunas diferencias desde la parte del roce, desde la parte de la agresividad, porque el futsal tiene menos contacto. Nosotros jugamos un deporte que se llama fútbol, pero viene del baby fútbol. Pero gracias a un gran entrenador y a un grupo de jugadores de gran talento, conseguimos ser campeones del mundo sin ser un deporte, el futsal, que sea extremadamente protagonista en nuestro país.
Yes, last question right here. We've got a mic coming to you. Just 1 second. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sol. I'm from Argentina. I worked more than 13 years in soccer with youth, so I know a little what about Gustavo speaking. I've been working with Mamana, Pesela, Poncio, so a lot of Argentinians, elite players. As he said, the head, it's like the head is like the roof, you know, about the soccer players. I would like to know is like how do they work, what they do so as to strengthen. It's like the head in certain ways. Like actually we know that it's totally important technique, but as well the emotional coaching. So if do they do that something different than what we do in Argentina, that we have very less resources. So just to know if in France or in the US, do they do something different?
So the question is specifically to mental training of players in the U.S.
The mental is not something that you train like skills and things like that. It's little by little, but it's linked to the confidence. What you want is to bring players, to bring confidence to them. And you bring confidence in encouraging, saying that's good, in having objectives. You know, you can do 10 juggles. If you can't do it today, maybe tomorrow you will start. But you need to build up this confidence. Once the confidence is good, of course, if it doesn't reach the target, then you say, well, tomorrow we'll do again, tomorrow we'll do again. You, by your daily intervention, you will have an influence in building up the mental strength of the player. But confidence is, as I said, encouragement, positive feedback. That's why, you know, sometimes we are very keen on saying what is not right instead of saying what is good, what is right. It's very important to enhance the good of the player. And also the fact that you say you trust them, you'll do it. I'm sure you'll do it. You build that confidence and you build that mental strength through your intervention in your play. That's why I think you need specialists.
I think that preparation and confidence are vitally important, and one is a product of the other. So when we had our best teams at DC United and Bruce Arena was our coach, people always asked me, well, was Bruce, and we always played well in the biggest games. And people said, well, is Bruce a great motivator? Does he make great speeches? And I said, no, he doesn't actually make speeches. But our players always went on the field feeling like they were prepared. They understood how they were going to win. They understood how the other team was going to play and how they would play against them. And they were never surprised by what happened on the field. So they looked highly motivated and they looked extremely confident because they were. But it wasn't because somebody made a speech or engaged in some mental exercise. It was because they were prepared.
Thank you. That's all the time we have, but I want to say thank you to Jason, to Gustavo, to Kevin, and to Gerard. I've enjoyed sharing the stage with you. And again, these folks will be behind in the mix zone if you have any other follow-up questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but thank you, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
It's always a pleasure, Gerard.